Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from today. My name is George, and I'm a digital transformation consultant at Sitecore. Now, I'm going to be our moderator for today. I'd like to welcome everyone to the 10th and final week of the Sitecore Virtual Summit webinar series, which will focus mainly on personalization. Now, we hope you've been inspired by our keynote speakers and our partners throughout. Now, before we go any further, I'd like to do a quick sound check just to make sure that everyone hears me fine. So could everyone please type yes in the chat panel below if you can hear me? Okay, fantastic. We're getting lots of yeses. Now, if you've joined other webinars that I've moderated before, you know that I'd like to go over through some housekeeping rules just to make sure that everything goes smoothly and you all enjoy the best possible experience. Now, all attendees are on mute. That's simply so we don't all talk through each other. However, you can ask any questions you'd like throughout the webinar, and we'll attempt to answer all of them at the end. Now, guys, just remember, I certainly encourage a lively conversation. That's the only way to learn, so don't hesitate to use that Q&A panel. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, and you're going to receive the recording in a couple of days along with the slides. Anyway, without further ado, today we've got Ruth Irvine with us, who is account manager at Sagittarius. Now, Ruth is an experienced account manager and personalization consultant who specializes in Sitecore implementation and consultancy at Sagittarius. Today, Ruth will talk about the path to personalization. Now, obviously, it goes without saying that I'm very excited to have Ruth here with us today and listen to her presentation. But Ruth, I believe you're a much better fit to introduce yourself from here on out, along with the presentation, so please take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, George. So welcome, I suppose, firstly, to the presentation I'm going to run through today, which is the path to personalization. I just want to give you a little bit of an introduction to me. So I, as George has already said, am a digital account manager for a global digital agency, Sagittarius. We specialize in Sitecore web development builds, but specifically we do a lot of the implementation for personalization with Sitecore. So we run Sitecore business optimization services. So we work with clients to implement personalization. And I have been working with Sitecore for about 2.5 years and have implemented this with about 20 to 25 clients now. So without further ado, I just want to give you an overview as to what we will cover within this webinar today. So initially, I'm going to look at what actually is personalization, how it works and why you should go to the effort of implementing it, and how and what a personalization strategy really looks like. We'll also touch upon digital optimization and how we can create a seamless experience for our customers. Now, I know that there's quite a few of you on the call, and when we look at personalization, there's lots of different stages that we find clients are at. So today I've tried to address lots of the different stages. So you might have Sitecore but actually haven't implemented personalization yet. You're thinking about Sitecore and looking at the possibilities of what personalization offers. Or perhaps you've started on the road to personalization but have stopped, or perhaps you just want to do more. So hopefully all of you with all of those different questions will have some takeaways. Now, personalization is obviously a great digital transformation tool that we have at our services, but really I think we need to roll back and look at the marketing principle behind that. Now, I closely link it to AIDA, which stands for attention, interest, desire, or sometimes known as decision and action. And it's one of the founding principles of most modern day marketing and advertising. So attention, firstly, we need to get their attention. Once we have their attention, we need to sustain that with some interest and create desire. And then finally, we need that one magic stage, which is for them to take that action, for them to take that conversion. And I feel like personalization basically helps push people through the funnel and improve conversions, and we use AIDA as a marketing principle in order to do this. And the reason that we do this is because the path to purchase from start to finish is rarely linear. It is more akin to a scavenger hunt. And if we look at this in principle, we know that decisions are not made in straight lines. You know, customer one comes to the website, they might come from an online ad and then hit a landing page, perhaps then go to the website. Whereas customer two could take a different journey, and customer three will have totally different touch points. So to try and capture all of that information and personalise according to that is actually quite a challenge. And the reason that we need to take this seriously, one, if you've already got Sitecore, obviously it's a costly platform that we need to make the most of, and you need to get that return on investment. But also, you know, 38% of brands and companies are looking to increase the investment within 12 to 18 months. So really we need to be, you know, one step ahead of the fold with this. Now, personalisation lets you keep up with evolving customer demands. It allows you to deliver targeted content in real time to the right person. So therefore, it allows you to make contextual decisions. And with Sitecore, you've got the tools to look at the analytics to base the results that you should trust. And just before we move on, I just want to look at why you should bother. So we've talked about better return on investment with a platform like Sitecore. You need to have more meaningful engagement with your clients. So we've gone from the days where you send an email perhaps with their name at the beginning. So, hi Ruth, for example. It's more about tailoring the customer journey to suit that individual, which allows you to build stronger relationships with your customers.
Hi guys, if you can hear me, I think Ruth dropped from the audio. Guys, can anyone hear me? Ruth, if you can hear me, the audience cannot hear you any longer, so can you please reconnect to the call? We're trying to get this sorted out, guys. One moment.
Hi, George.
Okay. I think, can everybody hear Ruth? Ruth, could you say something to the audience just to make sure that they hear you?
Hi, so we're just talking about targeted relevant content. Can everyone hear me?
Yep, we're getting lots of yeses. Okay, so we're back on. Sorry, guys,
Perfect.
for this intermission.
Sorry about that. So I'm not sure where we got to, but now I'm just talking about targeted relevant content, and we're just walking through an example of a UX with an online shop. So we're at the third stage of me visiting this website. I'm a returning visitor, and the top component has changed to try and entice me to sign up. So again, trying to push me down the funnel. So once I've clicked that, I might sign up and give my details, which allows me within Sitecore to then launch within an engagement plan. Then here on my fourth visit, potentially I'm going to map GeoIP data with maybe the weather. So I can start to promote targeted relevant content based on their location, based on their surroundings, so what the weather's doing. So again, potentially getting people to buy things at the right time, at the right place. And finally, now because they've signed up in stage 3, I can then start to deliver them targeted information to allow them to check out more easily, i.e. giving them or enticing them with a discount. So as you can see, these are small incremental changes to the user experience. Now, I'm not changing the menu or the layout of the site. I'm literally just changing the content to push them through the funnel. And I think that's something that we all need to remember when we're looking at personalization. It's small incremental changes. And I think, just to put this into context, the personalization is everywhere. So, for example, when I am on Google, the results that return to me in Google, I'm not sure if my video is playing, so if I search for restaurants in London, for example, the results that are returned to me are specific to my browsing history, so what I've Googled or potentially other sites that I've visited previously. And likewise with Apple Music, now I can tailor my music based on potentially the mood that I'm in or the day of the week that it is. So our surroundings are actually already starting to be personalised for us without potentially us realising. And as consumers, we have quite a short attention span. I think it's even been claimed that it's less than what a goldfish is now within our digital sphere. So we have to deliver right content to the right people at the right time, because if not, as consumers, we just don't pay attention and get bored. Now, obviously, we've got the great example of Amazon. Now, with Amazon, I think you've probably all heard the expression that not one of us has ever seen the real Amazon, because there's so many A/B tests happening at one time. But if we look on the left-hand side, we've got an anonymous user. Now, here the anonymous experience is trying to entice me to sign up, but there's no relevant content, no browsing history, etc. However, once I'm signed up, they're pushing me to join Prime, or they're showing me relevant products based on my browsing history. So as you can see, the UX doesn't really change too much, but they are showing me correct content. So how do we identify our users' behaviour? Well, there's several ways in which we can do this. And really the way that we explain it within Sitecore is we look at the difference between implicit and explicit behaviour. So implicit behaviour is really about your digital maturity. So your browse or search preference, perhaps when you visit a website you hang around a particular product category, or you are interested in a particular thing. So really it's about your behaviour on site. And this is what we track in Sitecore with your profiles and personas. So we try to segment you based on content. Whereas on the other side, we can personalise based on explicit behaviour. Now, explicit behaviour is looking at actual goals that are happening on site. So perhaps you've clicked a specific ad, or you've achieved a particular goal, or you've viewed a particular page, or perhaps it's even the device that you're visiting on, but it's things that we specifically know about your visit and who you are. So we can personalise based on both implicit and explicit behaviour. And the reason that we do this is to look at the context of your marketing and to really try and push you through the digital or your digital maturity. Now, I'm sure some of you have already seen this diagram. Sitecore have, I think they've actively promoted it. But your digital maturity kind of fits into 3 phases. The first phase is the attract phase. Now, when we start working with clients, we often see them sitting around this area before they've really started to get to grips with Sitecore. So you might have a basic brochure site, potentially some social integration or a mobile optimized site, but really you're not leveraging the Sitecore platform. Now, within the optimize and nurture stage, or the convert stage, as this part of the maturity diagram is known, we have started to implement personalization. So we've got the implementation of XDB, so that's where you've got Mongo database installed, and we can therefore start to gather data upon, or analytics based on your users' kind of route around the site. We can implement personalization, and we start to look at multi-channel and starting to build stronger relationships with clients. Now, within the final stage, which is the advocate, which is kind of what we're all striving for within, as brands, this is where we want our clients to be. So not clients, customers to be. And this is where we start to leverage CRO, so using predictive personalization and ultimately trying to create that single customer view. Now, I've been working with clients for a while now, and really, if we've got the ambition behind the client and they've got the team model to support this, we can really get them from the initiate stage to the lifetime advocate stage, within 1 to 2 years, even quicker if they've got the appetite to do it. So really, it's quite possible to achieve this. And just to put that into context, let's just benchmark that with different industries. Let's face it, most people are still at the initiate stage. So, the fact that you're joining this webinar today shows that you've got the appetite to kind of push through that. I mean, as at Sagittarius, we work with a lot of travel brands, and we see that actually their appetite to start progressing this is changing, and they are starting to creep into the nurture and lifetime customer stage. Now, just a quick tip, you might actually want to visit Connect the Experience on the Sitecore, as a Sitecore questionnaire, basically, that you can take the assessment, and it will tell you where as a brand you sit within the digital maturity. So this will kind of give you a platform from where you need to go from. And I want to just give a little bit of context, really, behind personalisation. So when I speak with clients, they often say that it's difficult to implement. It's, from a technological point of view, it's quite a lot of work. In fact, that can't be further from the truth. Sitecore as a platform offers all of the tools in which you can do it. It's really content which is the challenge. Back gone are the days where you would have to have one set of content for the homepage. You now need 4 or 5 potentially, dependent on who you're targeting or the segment of audience that you're targeting. So you do need to consider the content team or the strategy around that. I often work with clients where they push personalization back to stages 2 or 3 or 4 of the project. But when we're doing builds, our advice really is to make sure that the goals, profiles and personas are implemented at the stage of build. So once you launch, you're already starting to collect that data. And once you've got the data, you can then start to look at your personalization strategy post that. But gathering the data is the most important thing. And the question of how much, if we look back at the UX that I presented earlier on, it really is just enough to make a difference. We're not talking about radically changing the user experience of the site. We're talking about just changing small things to push the user through, so small context changes. Now, with everything, there are some prerequisites that you need to consider. If you're on version 8 or above of Sitecore, you will have XDB, so Mongo database enabled. Now, this basically is a database that allows you to collect the data behind or the analytics data behind the user experience of the site. Now, that ideally needs to be enabled because it gathers the trailing values. So as I move around the site as Ruth, if I come back in 5 days or 2 days, that data will still be stored against my profile. So I can start to personalize based on my trailing value. Now, if you don't have that installed, it's not the end of the world. You can still personalize based on goals or things that have happened on site within that time period. So, for example, they've triggered a particular goal, or they're in a particular location, so I can personalize based on their location, or even they're on a particular device. Something to consider, though, if you do want to use device or geo-IP location, there are some additional costs within the App Center, but they are quite minimal. And then, really, from a content architecture perspective, you might have heard of the Helix framework, which is based on the Habitat setup. Now, this is where you have components. So as you can see on screen, this might be one component, which is a display component. Now, the reason that we ideally like clients to have this framework attached is because it allows you to just personalize small elements of the page rather than having to personalize the whole page, because a lot of the content will still be relevant for most users. So this here on the right-hand side is a component display. Then behind the component, we have our data source that feeds all of the data that is displayed within the component. Now, this is a kind of a different setup to traditional website builds, I suppose, where all of your content just sits on one page. With this framework, it allows us to interchange and change certain elements. So, as I said, the data source feeds as component. Now, also, when we look at personalization, we also need your goals to be implemented and also your profiles, personas, and pattern cards to be implemented. And this is what I'm going to look at now. So these are the steps that we need to take to actually implement personalization. And Sitecore often refer to this as the SBOSS program, so the Sitecore Business Optimization Services, which is a series of workshops which allow you to embark on the path to personalization. Now, essentially, what we do within this is we initially work with you and your clients to pick objectives. So you need to understand what your business objectives are and also how we can segment your audience. So what are the different types of people that are coming to your website? We then set goals. We document the journey, so how potentially those users found you. And then we start to gain insights. So what are the most visited pages on your site? And we ultimately use this data to start to personalize components. And we set the rules and then we optimize content. Now, when we look at implementing personalization, we often recommend clients just personalizing a very small amount of components initially, so maybe 4 to 5 things. And that's mainly because actually managing this content can be quite a challenge, and it's really good to kind of see the conversion rates on different elements or the different things that you're personalizing. So we suggest that you keep it small and then work up when you become more confident with the process. So what do goals actually look like? I mean, we speak about this quite a lot, but goals are essentially actions. They're things like forms completed or e-commerce sales, and they can be key page interactions. So a goal could be that they've viewed a particular page, or a goal could be that they've clicked on a particular action, or even that they've downloaded a particular media file or watched a video. So these are all kind of specific in their elements. Now, something that we should also consider is within Sitecore, there's this concept of facets. And basically what a facet is, it's a super goal, essentially. It allows you to group goals into another super category. And the reason that you would consider doing this is because your goals are all individual, but actually your goals will be grouped within potentially parts of the buying process. So rather than saying, I'm going to change this piece of content because this person has signed up to this form, I'm going to say anybody who has completed a goal which is tagged within the facet of purchase will then see this personalized piece of content. So it allows you to kind of change the content at a higher level and therefore is much easier to manage. that's just a little tip that you should probably consider doing once you've set out all of your goals. And then once we've got your goals, we really need to score them, and we call this through engagement value, and basically that is a measure of visitor behaviour. Now, to just put this into context, your most important goals will obviously have the highest value. So, for example, if I've paid a deposit or paid in full on phone, then that might be 750 points, whereas maybe reading a review might be 15 points. Now, as a user, as I move around the site, I start to add to my engagement value. So, for example, if I've read a review but then create a profile, I'll have 115 points, and then if I pay deposit, then I might have 615 points. So as you see, that my engagement value changes as I move around the site. So essentially, you assign engagement value points to score specific content, actions and behaviours, which therefore allows your profile to change and grow as you move around. So that is the goals area, so you need to implement those on site. And then the second element that I want to discuss is the profiles and personas, and this is how we look at segmenting your audience. So that is identifying who and why, how you are going to recognise them, and what you are going to do to help them, and why you should focus on those particular profiles or personas first. Now, we do this through something called potential impact and ease, which is often known as PI. So how easy is it to segment that particular audience segment, or what impact is it going to have when you speak to that audience, and ultimately, how easy is it to do it? Because when we look at profiles and personas, you need to have supporting content to be able to deliver to these people. So we tag a page within Sitecore with a persona. So if I don't have the content to support that persona, then there's no way of me identifying who they are. So we've spoken about the goals and the profiles and the personas, and I just want to touch on the terms that you need to be aware of when we're implementing this personalisation. So terms to be aware of are component, so that's the display component. These are the things that we're going to interchange and personalise. We've got the data source that sits behind the component, so that's all of the content essentially. I often refer to GIP, and that is basically just identifying the location of the user, because you can personalise by location. So the goals. Within Sitecore, we have the rule editor. Now, out of the box, you have certain conditions that you can personalise on. So I can personalise based on somebody has visited a particular page. Now, within the rule editor, you can personalise based on that. Now, there are several other rules that are simply out of the box, and it's simply when you go to the marketing control panel. Unfortunately, my video isn't playing here, but there is a video which we can probably share with you afterwards. Going to the marketing control panel, you create a goal within there. You then assign an engagement value to that goal. So it could be they've signed up with social. That then gives them 50 points. And then I can look at personalising based on that. Now, to set up a goal literally takes a couple of minutes once they're already defined. It's really getting the definition right in the first place, which is really important. Then once you've set up your goals, we need to look at identifying the content pages where we can tag your profile cards, personas and pattern cards. Now, within the content editor, you can assign a persona to each content item within the page. Now, you might have seen within your content editor, if you're an existing user of Sitecore, the little content person in the right-hand side where you can basically assign your persona to each page. But it's really important to make sure you've got the content to support this. But ultimately, setting this up literally takes a matter of minutes for each page. And that's why we recommend that you do this upon launch of your website so that you're starting to collect and manage the data. And then once you have got your goals and your profiles and personas set up, we can then start to personalize. Again, unfortunately, my video isn't playing here, which is a little frustrating, but simply within this component, you can see under content banner, you've got 3 people, like little symbols. You click on that and you can personalize a component, again, based on a particular goal that they've triggered. So maybe they have signed up to a particular campaign and you want to change this component. Again, once you've got all of the content set up, it's quite simple to just interchange the components. Just a tip, within the Experience Editor, there is such a thing called the Experience Explorer. Now, this is a really key bit of functionality with Sitecore, which I actually think is quite bedded down and not always that obvious to find. But what this allows you to do as a user is basically a simulator for personalization, because I'm only going to be able to see what components I'm changing if I've simulated that. So I can't test when I'm based in the UK. I can't test component changing in Australia based on their location. However, within the Experience Explorer, you can simulate that, so you can check that actually your personalization is working. So I definitely recommend utilizing that more when you do implement the personalization. When we work with clients on this, it can be a little bit overwhelming to start with, so we really do need to identify some quick wins. So give first-time visitors a special welcome. For example, let's look at the high traffic hitting pages, so potentially the home page or potentially landing pages that you're driving people to from specific marketing campaigns. Also, let's leverage their location. Within Sitecore, we can, like we said, we can get the GIP credits, which will allow you to personalize on location. Also, we can start to do some clever things with connecting and retargeting users. So we can launch them into an engagement plan where we can personalize based on remarketing efforts. FXM is a tool within Sitecore. It's Federated Experience Manager, which can allow you to track inbound traffic. So I can, if I've got, say, a third-party site that's linked to my site, so potentially it's a booking engine, I can then personalize when people come from that area into Sitecore. And then also campaign tracking. So I can create a campaign ID, tag that onto a pay-per-click campaign, and I can start to personalize a component rather than creating endless landing pages for that content. So again, that will make it easier to manage. And finally, we really need to look at optimizing the experience. So once we have implemented everything, it's really important to monitor the trailing value and the performance of the test that you're running, I suppose. You need to assess it and then optimize it, because when we launch the goals and the profiles and personas, we're making a lot of assumptions about who is visiting the site. But however, we might be missing particular areas of or segments of audience. So we need to kind of keep an eye on the analytics and test and learn and repeat, essentially. Now, once we've monitored, we've reported, we've evaluated, adjusted particular personalized components, we can then run this whole experiment again. And Sitecore has a plethora of tools in which we can do that. Within the Sitecore platform, I've kind of split them into a couple of segments. So within Create, we have Campaign Creator. Now that is where you create a tag that you can tag onto the end of your pay-per-click campaign, and then you can, like I've said previously, you can personalize landing pages or your home page based on a campaign that somebody has visited your site from. You've also got Federated Experience Manager, which basically allows you to add a small beacon tag to a third-party site, so you can either inject personalized content onto a third-party site if you have, ownership and rights to do so, or you can watch incoming traffic from that site and personalize accordingly. And then from a learning and optimizing perspective, we've got experience analytics, which I'm sure you've all visited. Now, this is great if you've set up your goals and your profiles, you can really get to grips with this. However, I would really recommend from the marketplace, you can download something called Experience Extractor. Now, this allows you to export all of the analytics within the site. You do have to do a bit of data manipulation, but one of the elements within Experience Analytics is quite difficult to download like you would within GA, Google Analytics, the data. So using Experience Extractor definitely allows you to manipulate your data a little bit more and see where the opportunities are. Within your experience profile, this is obviously where you get the granular detail about the specific user's interaction, so what goals they've triggered, or potentially what profile they're categorized as, or what campaign they've come off, or what their trailing engagement value is. And finally, the other tool which is really valuable is the Path Analyzer. Now, within Path Analyzer, you can start to see what routes or what customer journeys are working really well and those that aren't. So, for example, you'll see the red dots here. That's where we're getting a lot of fallout or where people aren't completing a particular journey. So you can visually start to see conversions or where conversions are happening or where they aren't, and that will allow you to improve on certain pages your user experience or look for opportunities in other areas. And just talking about taking that one step further is looking at A/B and multivariant testing. So A/B tests is when I maybe might want to look at personalizing one component to another, whereas multivariant testing is where I will start to personalize or test multiple components. And why we should do that is because, we as humans, we can make lots of assumptions. So my boss might say to me, change that component on the homepage because that's going to increase engagement. However, we don't know that because we're making an assumption. And we're moving into a world where we need to make data-led decisions. So actually, if I can see that changing that component has increased conversions, then that's great. I've got value there rather than just making an assumption. And also within Sitecore, you can gamify this slightly. So you can say that I think that it's going to increase conversions by X%, and then you start to have a leaderboard. So it kind of adds a playful element to something that you might be testing. Just a kind of final tip, actually, when we're looking at A/B testing, you can't be logged in as an admin. So if your user profile is at admin level, you will be exempt from workflows. So you won't be able to A/B test. And also you need to really consider the amount of visitors you're getting to your site over a particular time. So for me to be able to test something, I need to ensure that there is a specific amount of visits and time associated with those visits to kind of get a true engagement reading, I suppose. So Sitecore actually suggests that should be 3,130 amount of visits through a 90-day period. So again, those are just two little things that you should consider when looking at A/B testing to make sure you get it implemented right. And I suppose my final point is just have the confidence to do it. It's super simple to implement if you've got the tools and able to do it, and out of the box Sitecore has everything set up. So once you've understood your business objectives, you understand your segment of audience, you can really start to embark on this journey quite simply. So I don't know whether, George, to hand back to you to see whether we've got any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. And guys, we're sorry again for that technical mishap. I would love to say that we were just actually testing to see who was still awake in the webinar and who wasn't. Okay, time for questions. Let's see if we have any. We have a couple of questions that came in, actually. One of them is, Can you use personalization in Sitecore without using some other analytics tools, for example, Google Analytics? If so, would this skew the results because it's not all within the system?
Sorry, can you just repeat that? Sorry, can I use other analytics too?
Can you use other analytics tools? Yeah. For example, can you use personalization in Sitecore without using other analytics tools?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of personalization sits separately to the analytics tools. It's great to understand what your users are doing. You really kind of need to identify the opportunities within your site. So if you do have Google Analytics, you can see that, what your key landing pages are. But equally, you can just also make assumptions. Now, you obviously know your consumers better than anybody else. So if you think personalizing a component on a specific page without looking at the analytics is going to increase conversion, then you can do that. I would suggest that you look at A/B testing that first, which you can do within Sitecore. So before you make a permanent change, maybe you could test that personalization based on a particular segment, audience segment. So going back to the question, you don't necessarily need to use other analytics tools, but if you want to make an informed decision, and this is what we do have to tell people quite often, is to make an informed decision, we need to make a data-led decision, and therefore we've got something to measure against. So ideally, yes, look at other analytics and make sure you look at the analytics within Sitecore as well, but it's not a necessity.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, thank you, Ruth, for that one. We got one more question that came in. Where should I keep my customer data? Is it within Sitecore or a different database?
Oh, that's a good question, and it's probably a good question with GDPR, which is coming into force next May as well. So really, we do recommend that your data is stored within Sitecore, so we can start to see within Mongo database, you can start to gather the kind of intelligent data about your users, but equally we've actually worked with quite a few clients to feed that information into a CRM. Now I know that Sitecore have a couple of good CRM integrations already, and that's one with Dynamics and also Salesforce, and actually with the launch of 8.2 the Dynamics connector is a two-way connector. So what basically that means is the information within Sitecore feeds into Dynamics, but then if something is updated within the Dynamics CRM, that feeds back into Sitecore. Likewise, if I change from a particular profile in Sitecore because my user experience changes, so maybe I've was browsing for singles holidays, but then suddenly I am part of a couple, so then I start to look for different types of holidays. My segment or my audience, my profile is changing. That will then feed back into CRM, and likewise. So there's some, actually putting this into a CRM and then connecting that CRM with other data that you have within your organization can be totally powerful and can then create your seamless kind of omni-channel view and single customer view for your consumers. So yes, keeping it in Sitecore is valuable, but if you have got the budget and other resources, then connecting that to your CRM is probably more valuable.
Fantastic. Couldn't have said it better myself. One more question that came in is it better to personalize one thing and see results rather than lots of different things across the site? And I guess maybe something on the audience's mind, I know when I talk to a lot of marketeers, is there such a thing as too much personalization? When does it become overwhelming?
Oh yes, definitely. And I think, we always recommend clients to start really small. One, to build confidence, but two, when you've suddenly got this toolkit, people can become, incredibly overexcited and want to personalize everything, but actually you can't necessarily see the results. So usually on a home page, we would maybe recommend personalizing a couple of components initially, start to see what the engagement value is, and then proceed from there. But really, you have to remember that you have to create content for everything you're going to personalise. So it's really down to your team size and how much content you can inject onto the site. And to be honest, it's one of the blockers that we see when people implement personalisation, is not being able to generate that content. So definitely my advice is to start smaller, start to see the results, start to gain the confidence and see the conversions coming in, and then slowly look at other personalisation opportunities within your site to then kind of roll out accordingly.
All right, and we have one last question. Once personalization is set up, how long does it take to actually see results? That's a really good question.
It is a good question. So once you've got your goals and your profiles and personas implemented and you've published your site, then you will start to see that being recorded within the analytics within, say, 20 minutes or whenever your Mongo database is starting to record the data and push back into the live instance. So already you will see data instantly, and then as soon as you've launched your first personalized component, you again will start to see your data coming in. So it is quite instant. I wouldn't be reactionary to it straight away. I would let it bed down and start to see the data maybe over a period of a few weeks or a month, and then change accordingly. But you will start to see all of your data coming in instantly.
Yep, again, fantastic advice. So I think that's all the questions that we had for today. Thank you to the audience for being so engaged, and thank you to everyone for participating actually in the whole webinar series. If you'd like to know more about Sagittarius, don't hesitate to visit their website at sagittarius.agency. And Ruth, I'd like to really thank you for taking the time out of your day to host this webinar for us.
Not a problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys very much, and I'll see you guys soon. Have a good afternoon.